Michael J., the topic today is the USA no longer has a Republican Party. The United States of America, as at February 22, 2025, now has in position a Trump fascist white supremacist party. This is de facto fascist white supremacist party based on any definition of thereof. Simple as that. And we're talking more than a reasonable facsimile thereof. So now understand that the Trump GOP is now the fascist white supremacist party of the United States of America. You see it with DEI. And they've changed the understanding and interpretation of DEI to division, empirical non-equity, otherwise known as exclusion, it's as simple as that, folks. So, what I'm going to bring to you here now is the Cambridge Union. Roger Griffin. And it's very interesting how they define things. But just so that you do know, I'm going to put the blind down because natural light is just so bright today. Blind's all the way down. So we have in the chair, and normally they don't put these things public. The full debate, I'm going to put a link to this video. The full debate has a link in the footnotes as well in the description for the full debate. And what happens at the end, all speakers and audience members during this presentation, debating chamber, exit through either the eyes or the nose door. And the central door exit represents abstentions. So, after the debate, the chair calls the votes. The votes, in this case, when you see the full debate, it's in the footnotes in the description. The House believes, or more importantly, this House believes Trump is a 21st century fascist. And that's been my belief for some time, because I understand unequivocally that Trump and Putin have had a business relationship for a couple decades. So you can debate what's going on and what's motivating Putin, etc., etc. You're just wasting your time. Putin and Trump want to make a deal where they control the Western world and the European parts of this world. It's as simple as that. The signs are already there. You just have to look up and see them. You can debate this, that, this, or that. What's rather unfortunate is, to put things in perspective, you're seeing the last vestiges of the old imperialistic colonial type of gasps for air and power. So instead, and this is how the consciousness, the collective consciousness of America is aligned with their leader now. based on who has voted, how the vote has maybe been manipulated. That is open for discussion, I'm sure. Not in the same way that the Republicans falsely made that narration back in 2020. But here you have now where you have people following the leader in a position of creating pain and suffering for their own people, the culling of people, where they're creating further separation. The black vote's been suppressed for a long time by the GOP. There's a fear of minorities controlling the white species in America. This is really what's going on within the Republican Party. Has been for a long time now. And you see it filter down. So now you actually have a de facto fascist white supremacist party. So now we're going to go to, otherwise you would be building bridges and embracing everybody around this world, every country and everybody in a democratic union where everybody is uplifting everybody for a good, prosperous life. Building bridges instead of destruction. Simple as that. Now let's watch this debate. You may not agree with it. It's really a non sequitur. All the facts are there. You just have to look up. And now just pay attention to the video. Let's make sure it's further understood. There's a lot of people in the United States of America, a lot of intellects, academia, and other people in news venues that are debating this, that, or this, or creating false and misleading information. Let's be clear. The new era, and this is why Trump embraces Putin. He calls Zelensky a dictator. Everything's there. Everything has been there for some time. Elon Musk has gone on in videos recently with supporting the ADF, far-right right-wing group in Germany. And you see this, whereas they want to disrupt Germany, they want Putin to get a stronghold there, take over Ukraine, and in the alternative, what they may do, because they're still trying to hoodwink the rest of the GOP, and that is to get rid of Zelensky. And this is why you see the Zelensky, they call him a dictator in that, because in the alternative, they want to go back to the old Putin-style thing of putting a proxy in place that represents Putin, but looks like he's representing other interests. Simple as that. You got a fascist white supremacist party that's leading the country, the United States of America. That's why you see this anomaly of the administration of the United States of America going against its allies that have been loyal allies, Canada, Mexico, Europe, etc., since the end of the Second World War. Trump and his cabal of criminals want to change the world order. You can accept that and go for a path of destruction, harm, pain, and suffering, or you can rise up before it's too late, and we're not talking about physical violence. Rise up before it's too late and show that it is not acceptable. You prefer a path of goodness, of harmony, of a country that is looking out for the best interests of all, to eliminate pain and suffering, and have a good, eventful life for every human being in your country and around the world. It's your choice. You have free will and choice to do that, and I'll leave that with you. Let's go back to let's start the video.
Thank you very much for that fine speech. I'd now like to invite, as the second speaker of the opposition, Roger Griffin. Roger Griffin is widely acknowledged to be one of the world's foremost experts on the socio-historical and ideological dynamics of fascism, as well as the relationship to modernity of violence stemming from various forms of political or religious fanaticism. Roger Griffin, you have the ears of the House.
Thank you very much. But what you read in Wikipedia does not make it right that I am here to give you the truth about fascism. Mr. President, officers and members of the Cambridge Union, everyone in the virtual and non-virtual audience of this debate, friends, countrymen and non-countrymen, I come to bury Trump, not to praise him. I do not stand here as a political pundit or public intellectual, but as a specialist or academic influencer, to use modern jargon, on the phenomenon of fascism. Do bear with me, therefore, if I first dive into the complex semantics of the term fascism, and also if I have printed this off, because if I don't read, I go off-piste and fall into all sorts of little landslides of my own. At the height of the US presidential campaign of 2016, Libertarian Party candidate Gary Johnson was asked if Donald Trump was a fascist. He replied without hesitation, "It walks like a duck, quacks like a duck." Thus, for Johnson, Trump was self-evidently a fascist. The trouble with Johnson's assertion was that he was making what is known in logic as a category error. The metaphorical expression he used was misleading and fallacious. As an analytical term, the entity fascism is not comparable to a duck because it belongs to a different order of phenomena. Because a duck is a species of creature living and existing in the natural world, part of the Anatidae family of waterfowl. It has been possible for zoologists, therefore, to arrive at a high level of consensus on what constitutes its defining attributes or taxonomic features, despite its many subvarieties and evolutionary ancestors. Those working in the human sciences are denied the luxury of such unanimity or certainty. As Max Weber observed over a century ago, when it comes to entities such as capitalism, or to take a more modern example, genocide, no consensus can emerge on the basis of empirical research alone over what constitutes their defining attributes. Whether consciously or not, all definitions of generic terms are what he called ideal types. These are heuristic concepts extracted from the messiness and infinity and uniqueness of all human phenomena through what he explained as a process of utopian abstraction. It's a bit late for a lecture, but you're going to get one. In short, there is no objective, true, empirically irrefutable definition of social political phenomena such as fascism. However, as a field of specialist inquiry into them develops within academia, some conceptual devices may come to prove more heuristically useful and productive to researchers in their investigations than others, and thus become widely adopted as a working definition in the competitive marketplace of explanatory paradigms on offer. Within the Marxist tradition, such a stage was reached within months of Mussolini's founding of the first fascio in March 1919 in Milan. A high degree of consensus soon spread amongst communist activists that fascism was a manifestation of late capitalism in its most violently reactionary, terroristic and totalitarian forms, presaging capitalism's imminent collapse as a system. This, by the way, did not stop the German Weimar Communist Party calling social democrats social fascists. Outside Marxist circles, a workable degree of agreement on what the term meant proved far more elusive. In 1944, George Orwell was already complaining that, quote, as used now, the word fascism is almost entirely meaningless. 4 decades later, many experts in fascist studies still despaired of the possibility of a coherent definition ever emerging, some even calling it for it to be banned from the political lexicon. Beyond the ivory towers, the rampant inflation in the colloquial use of fascist as a slur word, as a term of defiance or cancellation, continued apace. Soon anyone with authoritarian tendencies, from parents to traffic wardens, were liable to attract the description fascist, routinely accompanied by the epithet bloody. In magazines, those following new fads started being dismissed as fashion fascists or health fascists. By this time, the prospect of the term ever being used forensically as an analytical scalpel and not as a baseball bat or splutter gun seemed remote. In one scene of a blockbusting movie last year, even Barbie is called a fascist at one point and retorts with an in-joke about Mussolini making trains run on time. Yes?
You cite Weber, but the inherent fault in Weber is that he builds inductively reasoned utopic models that can inherently never...
Yeah, can we have that in the bar afterwards? Because I don't want to go into heuristics and epistemology and Weber, not at this point, but all the different epistemological theories in the human sciences recognize that to a high degree, any term is a construct and does not have some sort of literal, objective correlation to entities, and whatever system you use, it comes to similar. We can debate that later, preferably when we're drunk. Sorry, I'm being populist there. Thus, it was inevitable that when Trump started his campaign to make America great again in the mid-2010s, articles and books started appearing in the US by the likes of Madeleine Albright and Jason Stanley, warning of the rise of American fascism. Therefore, Zach and Javid and the other proponents of the motion are in good company to propose that this House believes that Trump is a 21st century fascist. But however unproblematic such an assertion may seem, it ignores the fact that since the 1990s, and this is the evangelical note, since the 1990s, a high degree of consensus has emerged among non-Marxist academics researching fascism about a useful definition of fascism. By the noughties, it had become generally accepted outside Marxist circles that fascism is best approached, heuristically most usefully approached, as a revolutionary form of ultranationalism. It is one which sets out to bring about a total rebirth or palingenesis of society with a radicalness that demands the replacement of constitutional democracy by a new authoritarian order, a point that you made, Erin. Far from being reactionary and anti-modern, fascism draws on myths of the national past to create a radically new future. It wants the nation to be great again, but within a post-democratic totalitarian state. And look at the history of fascism and Nazism, you'll see that in practice. I must plead guilty to having coined a cryptic shorthand for this definition, palingenetic ultranationalism, but that only makes sense when you're very drunk. So, using this restrictive ideal type, what picture emerges when we ask whether Trump is a 21st century fascist? Certainly the fascists who attended the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville saw Trump as one of their own. Certainly Trump deliberately invited fascist support in the televised presidential debate with Biden in 2020 when he told the Proud Boys to stand back and stand by. Can't do American. I mean, what a stupid thing to say in a debate. Stand back and stand by? I mean, what are we doing? Certainly the Certainly the crowd gathered outside Capitol Hill on the 6th of January 2021 contained some who projected fascist fantasies of inaugurating a brave new world onto the slogan, "Stop the Steal." Incidentally, please, if you haven't already, listen to the podcast series on the BBC, The Coming Storm, which documents the way a lot of the people in that crowd were not even fascists. A lot of them were seduced by strange conspiracy theories like QAnon, but that's another story. Furthermore, it is at least plausible that that morning, in one compartment of the labyrinthine, delusional, dysfunctional mind of Trump, he was toying with the idea of a coup d'etat to overthrow the state in a grotesque parody of Mussolini's March on Rome or Hitler's failed putsch in Munich. Yet subsequent events indicate, and again I agree with what Erin was saying, indicate that sheer pragmatism forced him to renounce any idea of the putschist route to a totalitarian state. Instead, he set about the legal reconquest of state power by following the procedures, if not the spirit, of America's representative democracy, the path of re-election and a limited term of presidency. Once back in the Oval Office 4 years later, he has given no sign of heading towards some sort of a Hitlerite enabling act. Why should he? He is convinced that he has enough charismatic and legal authority to realize at least major elements of his vision for national rebirth and the remaking of the world in America's image through a process of renewal taking place within its existing constitutional democracy. He does not need to rule by decree when he can mass produce executive orders. So if Trump is not a fascist, not a revolutionary nationalist, or in my jargon, not a pan-genetic ultranationalist, and we had another nice one from upstairs, what was it, autocratic, anti-constitutional populist, yeah? If he's not one of those, what is he? Well, it comes back to the populist. The key to the answer lies in the historical fact that liberal democracy is only one form of representative government, and a very recent and contested one at that. Democracy in ancient Greece was a patriarchal system which excluded slaves and women from power and could accommodate... Oh dear, really? Oh. Can we have a populist vote whether I can finish this? Well, anyway, look, I'll try and summarize. I mean, once you grasp historically that democracy is not the same as liberal democracy, it's taken decades and hundreds of years for a whole load of various idealists in various parts of society to liberalize democracy. The process that we're witnessing in populist parties all over the world is the deliberalization of democracy. I mean, if you look at the AFD, I could give you a whole list. If you look at Modi, etc., they are not trying to carry out the type of constitutional revolution that was carried out by fascist states. If you look at Mosley, he flirts with Labour and Conservative, creates the new party through the British system, and then when that doesn't work, he creates a fascist party which doesn't get in. But the fascist plan or blueprint for Britain was a post-democratic state. Trump, in that sense, is not a fascist. He doesn't, in a sense, need to be. Now, I could read out a lot of this, but I'd like to read the last page, if I may. The term that I would really promote is what Viktor Orban calls his new Hungary, which is an illiberal democracy, which he uses with pleasure and triumphalism, and that what people like Trump are trying to do is to deliberalize America, but retain elements of the American tradition of democracy, which was originally in the 18th century accommodated slaves and genocide of the Native Americans. I mean, democracy historically is not a nice thing for lots of people. So I will get down to the very last bit. Trump has managed to climb the slippery pole of electoral politics to become, for the second time, president of one of the only two superpowers. He has now been given 4 years in which to impose his radical plans for the deliberalization of American politics and the remodeling of the international order to suit US interests. Plans which are sufficiently megalomaniacal, phantasmagorical and inhumane that they include seeing to it that 2 million Palestinians are forced from their homeland, now their houses no longer exist thanks to American bombs, and that Gaza is redeveloped into an Israeli Benidorm after the forced deportation and ethnic cleansing of its indigenous population. So I finish with this. If this is a man, Primo Levi, a survivor of Auschwitz, asked readers to recognize that each tortured, emaciated prisoner of the extermination camp still contained the flickering flame of a human life. This is a leap of the empathetic imagination far beyond the stunted mental capacity of radical right-wing populists such as Trump, Modi, Orban, Wilders, Weidel or Netanyahu, or their more moderate counterparts such as Le Pen, Meloni or Farage. In an interview he gave shortly before his death in 1987, when populism was in its infancy, Levy warned that a new fascism might arise, walking on tiptoe and calling itself by another name. Well, my counter-proposition this evening is that however cathartic and emotionally true it might feel to call Trump a bloody fascist or a fascist, in standard academic terms, he is not one, but something worse. And that worse is a process that's occurring throughout the world, which is the deliberalization or the threat of deliberalization of democracy, which corresponds to the increasing centralization of power in autocracies and the persecution of minorities within autocracies. And if we don't get a human community based on global empathy, we as a species are doomed, because we will not face and control the ecological crisis if we're all at war with each other, both within democracies and without. Thank you very, very much indeed.
Okay, so there you go. You can get caught up in the noise and try to intellectualize things or say my way, this way, that way. Or you can understand and make things simple. You've got to take over in the creation of a new order of the United States of America. You see it, it's right there in front of you. There is no argument as to what Putin's motives are. Putin and Trump have been aligned together for some time in order to manifest the order that you're going in now. This is why you have a culling of the civil service. You have a culling of the military by putting yes people in positions to take out roadblocks and any guardrails that inhibit the path that Trump and Putin want to take for the Western world, the European world, and the Asian world. It's as simple as that. So you have a choice before it gets out of control. People are already suffering needlessly. It doesn't have to be that way. Ukrainian people have suffered because of the Russian invasion. The Russian people have suffered because the decades of manipulation by Yeltsin and Putin, taking money out of the system for their own benefit to create oligarchs and proxies in various parts of the world, which included Ukraine back in the early 2000s and Belarus now. And you've allowed this to go on. It's right there in front of you. You can make a choice, stop this pain and suffering for all human beings and destruction, and work towards a loving, prosperous, and building bridges instead of destruction. Simple as that. So, do as my buddies do. You know my two buddies. Snoopy and his little bird buddy. When things are getting out of control, spiraling downward, understand you're not your mind. You came out of that womb, you had no thoughts. Ever since then, that brain's been filled with all sorts. Funny, that hard drive, call it a hard drive, has been filled with a lot of crap. So let go of the noise, look straight ahead, understand that a human being is not an animal and not to be treated like an animal, no matter what you think. Do not let the construct of money influence how you act, because it's simple. Pain and suffering, or love, harmony, and prosperity. I'll leave that with you. Love and peace to everyone. Take care, and until the next time, ciao.